Hi, I'm Amber Thomas, the community lead here at Data.World.
Hi, and I'm Dean Alamang, Principal Solutions Architect at Data.World. So Amber, did I ever tell you about the time that I went to the emergency room with a really severe abdominal pain?
No, that sounds serious. What happened?
Well, it turns out it was just a kidney stone. But at the time, I was uninsured. I was self-employed and insurance is complicated. So when I
Mhm.
went in, I wanted to make sure that I only got the services that I really needed. So every
Sure.
time they said we need to do some service, I'd say, is that really necessary? And how much is it going to cost? Well, that second question, how much is it going to cost? They literally laughed in my face.
Oh,
You don't, you're going to ask how much it costs before it happens. And so here we are. We're supposed to be in a free market economy. And here's something, a service that I'm not allowed to know how much it costs. I can't make an informed decision about whether I want it or not. And I can't go somewhere else and get it. What kind of free market is that?
right. I mean, normally in most things, you'd be able to shop around. If you're trying to buy a new couch or a new car or a new
Yeah, I
house,
mean, that's
even you
what
can,
free market means. And so here we are
yeah,
in our medical world, we don't have a free market at all. I mean, it's a racket.
right. No, I completely agree. Now, have you heard that there's actually a new law that has been passed by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services that actually requires hospitals throughout the US to release some pricing information?
Really? To release it to the public.
Yeah. So
Us.
they're actually, yeah, I know, isn't it great?
Wow. So I actually could get a price for these things.
In
Well,
theory, yeah.
what kinds of things do they have to release prices for?
Right. So they're supposed to release two things. One is a list of 300 like shoppable services. And this can be anything from like imaging and lab services. So if you need like
Yeah.
an x-ray or something, to medical and surgical procedures. So if you had to have some sort of surgery because of your kidney stone.
Like the
Um,
ultrasound and all these. Yeah, right.
yes, exactly. So they had to release like a list that is usable for customers to look at and find the prices for 300 services. The other thing they had to release is a machine readable file with information about pricing for all of their services, including information about how much different insurance carriers have negotiated, like as a fee for
Okay.
different
Now,
services.
now, when you say machine readable, though, I mean, you and I know that there's machine readable and machine readable, right?
Right.
So do they specify anything in the law about what they mean by machine readable?
Not really. It's basically they kind of just indicate that it's a machine readable file. It's the type of file that a machine and a human can kind of read. You know, typically when I say machine readable file in this context, I think of a spreadsheet, something like
Okay.
Excel. That can be a good example of that kind of thing where information is arranged in a consistent and structured way. But if you're familiar with machine readable files, I mentioned a spreadsheet like Excel, but there's actually a lot of different file formats that are technically machine readable. And the CMS didn't really give any guidelines on what sort of files folks should use, um, and how any of that should be structured. So they did tell them what kind of data they needed to release, but
Okay.
not how to share it.
So who's the intended audience of that? I mean, you're not going to have somebody in the public just looking at this a spreadsheet and figuring stuff out.
Right.
What's the idea of how it's going to be used?
Yeah, so I mean, like theoretically, somebody from the public totally could. The idea is that this machine readable file should be made public. So if you are just a very curious person, you should be able to find this, access it for
Mhm.
free, and dig into it. But of course, these files are going to be potentially very large and pretty complicated. And so it was really intended to be mostly useful for like employers and medical providers and sometimes developers,
Mhm.
to create more consumer friendly price transparency tools.
You can have sort of
So,
a cottage industry of user-facing applications that are based on this data.
yes, that was the original idea. So, like, people could come and they could make an app based on all of the information that hospitals are releasing because they now have to.
So this is great for a patient, like in my story when you're going in there. But how are they getting the hospitals to actually do this? How do they enforce it?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great question, right? Because how do you get anybody to do anything really? And in this case, the answer was to fine them if they don't. So, right now there are fees based on the size of the hospital, and above a certain size, they start paying a certain fee every day
Oh,
per the number of beds that they
come
have
on,
in the
Amber.
hospital.
You know what they're going to do? They're just going to not bother to do it. They're going to pay the fine, and then they're going to take that charge and they're going to send it back to me. This isn't going to do
Right.
anything, right? Right.
I
So
mean, and that's
I'm
completely
sure
fair.
yeah.
And just like a few weeks ago, they actually passed an increase in those fees because people were doing just that, and they were either like they were just paying the fee instead of releasing the data or releasing it in the way that it was supposed to be. So they're really trying to crack down and really make these hospitals release the information that the public really needs to make informed decisions about their own healthcare.
Yeah, but in a lot of the industries that I've seen, Amber, even if somebody decides they want to comply, there's still a lot more issues going on. I mean, you've got different naming conventions. Somebody calls it one thing, someone calls it another. You have file types. You said they didn't specify anything about the file types. You need information about how to interpret this sort of stuff. There's a whole lot of issues, even if we do solve the compliance issue around getting this data together so that a developer could actually use it to provide something useful to the public.
Right. And that's exactly what's happening. So we at Data.World were like, this is great. There's a bunch of data. And the problem is it's just scattered around the internet. And that was really what we thought the problem was, is that data was scattered to all of the individual hospitals, individual websites. And then we started looking into it, and there's a bigger problem than that. And it's exactly what you mentioned. It's people are releasing different types of files that you can't easily combine. They're using different coding systems to talk about different procedures. There's even a little bit of a discrepancy over the way that some people refer to price, where some people are incorporating, like the doctor's fees and yes, absolutely. And even the way they're reporting all of this information. So the data is really widespread, but it's also very messy.
Yeah, well, Data.World is actually a really good platform for doing this work. I mean, after all, well, first of all, like you say, there's already some data out there, and you can find this stuff on Data.World already. I'm always going to Data.World and discovering that somebody has brought some data in that I didn't expect. But something that we could do is a lot of standards in the medical field, things like the ICD codes for the procedures and so on. So one of the things you can do with a knowledge-based platform like Data.World is create reusable assets for talking about those things. And that's something that we do all the time on Data.World. And what we could then do? We could take this data, host on a Data.World, match it to these reusable resources, then republish it out so that these employers and developers can actually do it. So actually Data.World, there's a lot I think we could do to help this situation.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that Data.World is like a knowledge graph based platform. Can you speak a little bit to what that means and how that makes solving problems like this a little easier?
Let's see, a knowledge graph, you represent the data as a graph. That means you can connect it together. But a knowledge graph means you could actually talk about the data inside of that same graph. And this is sort of thing that I've done in a lot of my practices in the finance industry and in media and lots of places where we can bring data in, represent what it means, exactly like you were saying. We don't know what the fields and these things mean, represent that explicitly, and then we can get a 360-degree view, as it were, of the data. And Data.World is a great platform for this. It's built on standards. You can share things. Somebody can just donate data. You just find some data on the web, drag and drop it into Data.World. I've done quite a lot of this myself. I find other people are doing this. It's actually happening. Or you can piggyback on other projects where people have brought in data for some project or other, like about COVID, for instance, and then just reuse it. So this is the sort of thing that Data.World is good for in a lot of industries. And it seems like this whole problem is just right for this kind of a treatment.
Yeah, and it sounds like we'd be able to bring in all of those different data sources and really combine them
That's
in a
right.
usable format.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've actually started doing some of this, Amber. How far along are you? And where do we go from here?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We have started exploring this a bit. So like I said, we kind of originally started going out just looking for the data and seeing what we can find. And we were able to find that hospitals were at least following some amount of compliance where there appeared to be a machine readable file of sorts. But like I was saying, it's pretty messy and everybody's doing it differently. So what we've started doing is pulling data from a few hospitals onto data.world and trying to do exactly what you said, create a reusable resource to combine all of those different files. Now, moving forward, there's a lot of other steps that are going to have to take place between where we're currently at and where we're trying to go. And ultimately where we're aiming to be is a reusable resource, both in terms of a big data set that would allow you to find out how much an ultrasound to look for a kidney stone would cost in Columbus and how much it would cost in Seattle. And you'd be able to find that out, or look at the different hospitals in your area if you don't feel like traveling across the country for an ultrasound.
So if I didn't work at data.world and I wanted to get involved in this, would I be able to track what's going on and see what's happening there?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said about data.world, some of the cool things are that people can bring in data and you can make it open and publicly available. And so that's what we've done with the work that we've done on this project so far. So we can provide the link right here. If you'd like to follow along, you can absolutely follow this project on data.world. If you would like to be involved, you can reach out to us and we can find ways for you to get involved. The simplest thing, honestly, would be if you went to your local hospital's website and found where they're keeping this machine readable file and upload it to data.world. And then we can start adding that to our corpus of hospital machine readable files. So
this sounds great, Amber. I'm really looking forward to moving forward on this.
yeah, I think it's going to be very exciting and we hope to share more in the future.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.